So welcome. I'm going live to talk about clarinet and saxophone articulation as part of our Facebook group, the Woodwind Support Community today. So I'm going to keep an eye on the Instagram and Facebook comments to talk about articulation. So I had a lot of people fill out a survey to kind of talk about what they wanted to know about articulation. So we're just going to be doing a quick overview today, troubleshooting some articulation problems, and also giving you some practice tips for both instruments. So we're going to start with clarinet, and then we're going to do sax. And both of them are pretty similar, so I think there'll be a lot of overlap. And for those who don't know me on our Facebook, I'm Anna Nelson. I play clarinet and saxophone, so we're going to be giving you some articulation tips today. Okay, so let's get into it with the clarinet first. So, hi Amanda. Let me know if you can all hear me okay here on the Facebook. So a lot of people were talking about that they struggle with getting a good articulation sound and also fast articulation. So we're going to talk about some articulation technique first. So here's our clarinet. So one of the big problems I see with my students when they're doing articulations is that like kind of thuddy sound that's kind of heavy and prevents you from kind of getting a clean, light articulation. So I'm just going to articulate some 16th notes here on the clarinet. Let me see if I can turn up the volume. Let me know if that's any better, Amanda. Okay. Okay, so the first tips for articulation actually start with your throat position on clarinet. So when I'm playing clarinet, I like to think or E in my throat. Usually if your throat position's, oh thank you. Yeah, usually if your throat position's really low, you're gonna get a funny sound even if your clarinet articulation technique is correct. So here's like the thuddy sound I hear a lot from my students when they're doing articulation. Right, that's kind of the sound that we try to avoid. So actually that is caused by your throat position. So a really good exercise to check your throat position, I'll be talking about this more in the tone video, is I just do some octave key exercises on clarinet. So I'm going to take a C, and then I'm going to press the register key. And then if that note pops out right away, it generally means that my throat position is pretty good. If my throat position is too low, so if I'm thinking maybe like an ah instead of or E, it's not going to come out as clean. Right, we get kind of that undertone that we don't really like. So that's the first step, even before starting articulation, is just getting that throat position going. So then the next tip would be talking about the actual articulation technique itself. So when I'm tonguing on clarinet, I like to think pretty close to the tip of my tongue to the tip of the reed. So I'm pretty much right near the tip here, and that just helps with getting a really nice light sound. So so that's pretty much here on my tongue. If I'm a little bit farther back, we're going to get that thuddy sound again. So that's like here on my tongue. So that's a lot of what's causing the thud is both the low throat position and just tonguing too far back on your tongue. So some exercises to practice that. I have some books and studies I can recommend, but the first thing is to just practice your articulation on some scales. So I'll just take my C major scale and I'll just do either 8th notes or 16th notes. And I will put it on a tempo that's comfortable for me, so I have my metronome here. Maybe a good starting tempo could be like 80 or something. So this is a quarter note. So like. And then gradually speeding it up. I like to practice at around 140 because that's a lot of, for the orchestral excerpts I'm practicing, and I need a lot of really fast clarinet articulation. So that's step one. Then you can combine practicing your clarinet and scales and articulation at the same time. Okay, so then that is the first step. Some other books I recommend there's a Cal Staccato Studies, that's pretty good. Um, there's also Longinus articulation exercise, but just getting the basic concept and doing it on some scales that you're really comfortable with, or even just one note, will be really helpful. So if anyone has questions about that, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm going to move on to saxophone articulation next. Okay. We have some new folks joining us on the Facebook and Instagram. So just to recap really quick, I'm Anna. We're going live as part of our Facebook group, Woodwind Support Community, just to talk about some different articulation tips. And for any flute players out there, Amanda's also going to be doing a flute video in our Facebook group, which is going to be really awesome. Okay, so saxophone articulation. Do I use double or single tongue? I see is a question. Yeah, so the first thing that you want to master is the single tongue. I know flute is is different. Amanda's going to talk about that. I personally don't really use double tongue. I'm much better at single tonguing. Some people will learn and master double tongue, but the first goal is to make sure that your single tongue is just really fast. So for me, that would be getting your single tongue up to like 130 or 140 with your 16th notes. Like quarter equals 130 or 140, really comfortable before even trying the double tongue. But the most standard way to just practice your articulation is single tonguing. And that goes for clarinet and sax too. So I'm using single tonguing for everything that I'm doing. Okay, so saxophone. So the difference between our clarinet and saxophone, and this might apply to doublers, is we have a slightly larger mouthpiece on the saxophones where throat position is going to be a little bit different. So if you're a saxophone doubler and you're playing clarinet and you're getting kind of a thuddy sound, or your articulation is not really what you want it to be, the first thing I check is that you're not using the same throat position on saxophone as you are on clarinet. So when I play saxophone, I'm using an ah throat position. So I'm pinking ah in my throat for saxophone. Just really nice and open and relaxed. You want, on both instruments, just a really nice open and relaxed sound without a lot of tension. So for saxophone, in terms of where my tongue is on the reed, I think I'm tonguing, and tonguing is individual for each person. So there might be something that works better for you that doesn't work as necessarily well for me. So I'm a little bit below the tip. I'm not right at the tip when I'm playing saxophone, but I'm still pretty close. So let me just do some, I'll just do some G's here. So I'm pretty, like here on my tongue and near the tip of the reed. So again, if I'm going too far back on my tongue, I'm going to get that thuddy sound that you might hear like 6th grade beginning band. I think we all kind of recognize that sound. Yeah, so again, it's going to be the same exercises that I'm doing on clarinet. I'm just thinking that ah throat position to work on my articulation. And I see a question here, how do I improve my single tonguing, especially if it's slow? So just starting at the metronome and working your way up. So for me, I'm doing 16th notes, but I'm doing them pretty slow. So I'll put my metronome on quarter note equals 60. I'll just do a scale here. So you want to just start really slow and make sure that everything's good at that slow tempo technique-wise before you move up. Also, the tongue is a muscle, so I practice my articulation every day. I notice if I do go a few days without practicing articulation, it's slower. You can also, I keep a practice notebook of my current articulation speed on both instruments so that I know how to reference it and set my metronome when I'm practicing it. So just daily, consistent practice of that and working with the metronome to get your tempo up. Let's see. So some other tips that can help with your articulation. So some books I use on saxophone are the Furling Studies, 48 Studies for Saxophone, And I also do some different exercises for jazz articulation too. I read some jazz etudes because that's a whole thing in itself as well. Okay, so some other things, like some misconceptions about articulation that apply to both instruments. And we'll see, I'm curious Amanda's flute thoughts on this too. So a lot of people, especially when something's really fast, will try to tongue really, really short. So if I have like a fast 16th note passage in my music, if you're trying to tongue really, really short, you're going to have a lot of tension. Right, and we get that kind of short, choppy sound. So you actually want to practice articulating legato and long. Right, because if I'm trying to do too short, kind of like I did at the end, I'm getting that kind of stop sound. So just practicing long articulation kind of just helps keep the tongue nice and loose and relaxed and keep the tension out. Okay, so does anyone have any questions before we finish up our live? We'll make sure to send a message about when that flute video will be up. Yeah, daily consistent practice. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be anything long. I do practice my articulation for at least 5 minutes a day, and I have the same, like yesterday I was practicing a Kel staccato study, and I was also practicing the Longinus articulation exercise for clarinet. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions about jazz articulation, I can probably do that in a future video. It's going to be the same technique. There's just kind of a stylistic difference and how we're going to phrase some of the notes and stuff like that. Cool. Well, I'll be watching the comments to see if there's any more questions, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll leave this up. So again, I'm Anna, and thanks for watching our video. Have a great rest of your afternoon.